Hello, everybody. Welcome to part 3 of Culture Speak, the art of talking about work. And in part 2, I talked about a stagnant culture. In stagnant cultures, you've got people low emotional intelligence, low engagement. Now, remember, emotional intelligence, engagement, these are the two observable factors that we see every day in work. Emotional intelligence, it's you being able or just being the best version of yourself. Whereas engagement is about the conditions the organization creates and also who you bring to work. All right. So engagement is a two-way street. Now, when you've got high emotional intelligence and low engagement, you have what we call a pleasant culture. Now, I was talking to someone recently who said that they'd done the 5 cultures quiz, which I'll mention at the end. And they said, yes, we came out pleasant. It was so accurate. And I said, but if you had to sum it up in one word, what would it be? And she said, well, it's just a bit nice, isn't it? And I was like, yes, that's the perfect word to sum up a pleasant culture. It's just nice. It's fine. It's a bit, it's like, it's fine. This is when you meet people at parties, if you're out at summer or, when you're at Christmas party, oh, how's work? Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. And so I think with pleasant cultures, the great thing is there's lots of empathy. There's lots of compassion. You actually might take the time to build relationships with your colleagues. Wouldn't that be great? And that's really important for culture. And so there is that emphasis, and empathy is the glue that holds teams together. So it's important that we have emotional intelligence. It's crucially important. We've downplayed the role of emotional intelligence in our workplaces for too long. And so when you have that, and that, by the way, that doesn't mean that you have to all be mates. I was talking to a footballer in the US recently. And I said, tell me about the best team you ever played for. And he told me, and I was like, I'm just curious. And I literally, like curious, I already made a list of about 6 questions. I said, were you all mates? He's like, no. I was like, were there disagreements? He said, yeah. I was like, were there any fights? He was just like, not physical. No, he was like, because we had too much respect for each other. He said, yes, we fell out. Yes, there were bad tackles in training. Yes, there were some crosswords, and sports teams very much have a culture where there are certain things you could say that you could never say in an office culture, of course. He said, but we had too much respect for each other. And I think that's the key, is that's what you want is respect. And often that's lacking in pleasant cultures. Because even though there's lots of emotional intelligence, engagement is generally low. And so you get a fair bit of gossip because we're not focused on what we need to do or who we need to be as a group in order to succeed. So there's a fair bit of gossip, there's a fair bit of backbiting, and we end up kind of sliding towards the stagnant, but we never really go that far. I've worked in my fair share of pleasant cultures. But we've got these strong relationships, and what they end up being is cliques. And so as soon as you hear our organization, or as soon as I hear, we have quite a few cliques, I'm like, okay, so you got a pleasant culture. Because you've got pockets of people who are doing good stuff, but they're not connected. And so silos often happen in pleasant cultures as well. So you've got pockets of good, they just don't work well together. And honestly, they've got no intention of working well to each other. It's just like lobbing grenades over the fence, but they don't go off because they don't want to hurt anybody. Of course they don't. But they just want to send a message that, we're doing it this way. And if you want to do it, this way with us, great. If you don't, then we're just not going to speak to you. The interesting thing about pleasant cultures is lots of harmony. So we're interested in everybody's opinion. Everyone's copied into every email. If you're in an office, and everyone's invited to every meeting, or there's too many meetings. For me, pleasant cultures, they're always good to a point. There's optimism, but it's blind optimism. I was talking to my brothers recently about a former Everton manager. I don't want to make this all about sports. And we said, oh, why didn't he succeed? I was like, because he was full of blind optimism. When things were bad, he said they were good. And we were like, really? And, I'd spoken to an ex-athlete. He's like, yeah, that was really weird. Even when we played bad, he focused on the good. And that's not to say you want someone who's completely negative, but also sometimes you just need to be told. So there's lots of good intent. The other thing about the pleasant cultures is sometimes they're just not challenging enough. Do you know what I mean? We all need to be outside of our comfort zone just a little bit, not for hours, days, weeks, months on end, because that gives rise to a combatant culture, which I'm going to be talking about on the next part of this series. But they're just not challenging enough. And so you'll read about people, or you'll see people, or you talk to people. It's like going, yeah, I just feel I'm going stale here. I just need a new challenge, and you'll nod and you'll go, yeah, I know what you mean. And so often people stay in pleasant cultures, even though they're not fulfilling, because they've been there a while, because there's lots of harmony. They don't want to leave. I think pleasant cultures generally are quite risk averse, and the people in pleasant cultures are risk averse, so they don't really want to take a leave. They don't want to lose the conditions that they've got. Also, there's this general fear, which is completely understandable, about moving roles. And so when you ask people to do stuff in pleasant cultures, there's this sense of, oh, we'll do it, but it's going to be hard. And so that's the word I hear a lot, particularly when I work with organizations helping them to change culture. It's like, yeah, culture change is hard. And of course, it's really not, if you've got the skills to be able to do it. And in order to do that, you have to have a greater level of engagement. People have got to want to develop the skill set. The fact that you're watching this video now, or listening to this, if you're listening to it as a podcast, is an indication that you're engaged in your work because you want to get better. And of course, if you put it then into action, if you start having these conversations around culture, then your level of engagement goes up. And then what you actually start to notice, is that whether the organization's level of engagement matches yours, because you start to get frustrated. Why aren't they providing us with management development programs? The vision is this complicated paragraph. It should be short and sharp and really used for decision making, those kinds of things. So your engagement score, if you're measuring it and tracking it here, is around about 40 to 60%. That's the engagement score. But like I said, they're not the worst places to work. They're just not challenging enough. And you always miss targets. You always miss deadlines, because no one's just got the desire to get something done. Now, if you want to find out where you are right now, then you can do that. What kind of culture that you have, head to www.5culturesquiz.com, answer the questions there, and then within an hour you get a report which will tell you where you are. And in the next part of the series, part 4, I'm going to talk about combatant cultures.